Hello, everyone. My name is Jacqueline, and welcome to today's Author Celebration Live. We're honored to shine a light on a deeply transformative and soul affirming book, Voices Stepping Out of the Darkness and Into the Light by Cheryl Campbell. This powerful journey is for the empaths, the seekers, the women who fell out of place in a loud world. Cheryl vulnerably shares her path through trauma, awakening, and healing, guiding readers to reclaim their voice, embrace their spiritual gifts, and remember who they truly are. So if your soul has been whispering that it's time to rise, this is your moment. Let's celebrate voices and the light within. Welcome, Cheryl.
Hi, Jacqueline. Thank you so much for having me. So
Well,
excited to be here.
it's my pleasure. I'm excited too. So, before we dive into this incredible book that you have, how are you feeling stepping into this moment, celebrating voices and the journey that brought you here?
I am loving every single minute of it. It has been so much fun from writing the book to doing the initial launch for the ebook, and right now I'm currently recording in a very makeshift studio that you can't see because I have a virtual
Yeah.
background right now. But I'm working on the Audible version, recording it
Oh,
myself. And to really get the best sound, I'm surrounded by all kinds of crazy blankets and padding, everything else. And it just brings a smile to my face every time I sit down to do a recording. It's so much fun.
wonderful. Well, that's very exciting indeed. And I'm happy that you're also, doing one more step for this particular book because I know a lot of people will really be touched by this book. So if they're, and with the fast paced everybody has in their lives, everybody is in their lives right now. I'm sure some people would appreciate having them listening to your audiobook. So they don't have to they can just dive into it whenever they can. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. Well, can you share a moment or experience that sparked the idea for voices?
Actually, it's been an ongoing process because the title for the book came to me more than 3 years ago. And
Oh.
I had a different concept for the book at the time.
Mm.
And it just kind of sat there once I created the title. And I used to update my business Facebook page every once in a while saying coming in, and then it just never came until last summer, and
Mm.
last summer, what ended up happening was that I really started going through a whole different stage of my awakening. And there was a lot of it that caused confusion.
Mm.
And uh, I realized that I probably wasn't the only one going through it.
Right.
And all of a sudden, it just came to me in the middle of the night that this is what I needed to write about. And so once I made that decision, it was really interesting because all of the chapters just kind of channeled themselves. I would wake up with a thought, or something would happen, like the coyote experience, and I would sit down to write, and an hour and a half later, a chapter would be written. And so it just kept on coming to me and evolving right up until the very final submission to the publishing company.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Wonderful. Well, it's actually very interesting because most authors, most writers wouldn't even have an idea up until the very last a title up until the very last minute, and usually we would tell them, it's not really, you don't really have to think about it because you have the idea for the book. Go ahead and write the book. Once you're done with your manuscript, I'm sure the title will come out. But for you, it's totally reverse. You started with the title, and then just things fell into place. So
I,
that's
I'm
very interesting.
I'm almost laughing because I've never walked the normal path. Not since I was a child, and
Oh,
so I'm not surprised that it was done out of sequence.
that's
It just seems the way that I happen to work.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And that really just shows that you don't really have to have, there's no box on how you can, on how you're supposed to write, how to finish a book, how to publish. Um, Things just fall into place the way it's supposed to for everybody else, and that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, the book opens up with the idea that we often perceive, um, as breakdowns, many actually to be breakthroughs, right? So our breakdowns become our breakthrough. Can
Mhm.
you speak to what this looked like in your own life?
Well, I actually never consider anything a breakdown per se,
Mm,
when I really think about it, because I view it at all as lessons that
mm,
are just waiting to be learned. Because whenever we struggle with something,
mhm,
we're struggling because there's a deeper purpose there, and once we acknowledge it and bring it to the conscious mind, all right, then we can start working through it. But we could either work through it in a way that is painful, or we could work through it in a way that has flow and we can do it with grace. And I find that to navigate that with the grace and flow, you have to have the outlook that it is there for us. Whatever is
mm.
happening is there for us. And it's not happening to us, it's not happening against us, but it's happening for us. And so if we're breaking down in one area of our life, it just means that there's a lot of opportunity to grow. And it's all is the way you look at it, as I said, to either go through that experience, because you will go through it regardless, to go through it either with pain or with ease and flow.
That's true. And I love that. I love that. You recognize that you're going through something, but this is a challenge. This is a hard, time in our lives, but doesn't have to be just that.
It doesn't.
That there's a bigger purpose to all of this.
Mhm.
So you touch on healing emotional wounds and even general generational patterns. What's one generational pattern you personally had to confront and transform?
Again, there are little things that sneak up to you and come to the forefront of your mind once you
Hmm.
start, experiencing things a little bit. And for me, one of the ones that I actually talk about in the book was one day I realized that just a lot of my phrasing and everything was from my grandmother. And
Mm.
I loved her dearly, but she was always, like manja and eat this and eat your plate and have seconds and all of this. And when I caught myself saying that to eat to Ian, it was like eat everything on your plate. And I realized, wow, that's really, you don't need to do that. And just it started me thinking that with the generational stuff, our grandparents and our parents lived through a time, with, at least if you're my age, through the depression, and everything was different then, and it was very filled with lack instead of
Mm.
abundance. And so that just comes down, and when you start catching yourself doing these little things that um, all of a sudden you hear a grandparent's voice or whatever. Another one is that it always used to, whenever I was a little achy in my legs, I go, oh, I just have the Tancredi legs. And that was a generational thing, because as as the ancestors got older, they started walking in a certain way, and it was a little bit of shuffle and everything else. And I'm like, I don't need to do that. That's a concept that I was, well, we've got the Tancredi legs. I do, but they don't have to function the same way. They can
That's true.
function perfectly healthy if I allow that to happen.
That's wonderful. And I agree with that. And I think we our ancestors or even us, we tend to pass on what we know and what we've grown up with. But if we can recognize that, this is how I can do things better,
Mhm.
then it'll be much easier. So that's wonderful.
Well, no,
And many,
I have to add one thing to that as you're
yeah.
saying that. The other really important thing about that is it breaks any kind of cycle that we
Mm,
don't want to pass down to the next generation. So
yes.
when we heal that and we start, acknowledging that we can change it, we do break the cycle. And so that's really important too.
Yes, that's true. I agree. Well, many people fear or suppress their spiritual gifts. What help you embrace yours, and how can others begin trust theirs?
So as far as the gifts are concerned, I spent many years just thinking I was odd and I was different because, again, not to put an age on myself, but as I was growing up, these topics weren't talked about. And
Mm,
if they were talked about, you were looked at as being odd and different and everything else. And the fact that for me, it was compounded by a speech disorder that I had when I was younger, I just found it safer to be quiet. And so I
mm,
never really shared. And then once I did share it a little bit openly, I got odd remarks like, oh, you're such a whack job, or, you're just so woo, and that kind of
mm,
thing. So it took me many years for me to realize that they were gifts and not something to hide, especially when it comes to being compassionate and, so many other things. But I finally realized that if you didn't speak up about the topic and you didn't help the people out there that were going through the same and, thinking that they're alone in it too, then I'm
mhm.
doing a disservice. And so I really felt like I had to start talking about it more and sharing my experience so others don't go through the same. And, but when others are dealing with it, I think again, it's acknowledging that it is a gift. It's something we're born with. And regardless of what it is, don't be afraid of it. Explore it, find
Mhm.
out more about it. And also, I invite you to question yourself that is there somebody I can help by sharing this? And it doesn't have to be on a book level or anything else. It could be in a conversation with a child or a neighbor or anything. If you have some information that you can share with them to help them through their journey, then you
Mhm.
need to share it. And every single one of us walk with multiple gifts. It's just a matter of acknowledging them.
That's wonderful. And you mentioned that the woo ones, those are the quiet empath, the soul searcher. Um, how did you feel, or how come how were you able to get into this realization that it is important to give voice to these audiences?
Yeah, it's something I kind of slowly grew into, and it all came with guidance, because
Mm,
I would wake up and say, oh, I need to write about this, or I need to share this. And at the time, um, we were creating a Facebook group called the Women's Impact Network.
mm,
And I was the one always talking about spirituality and everything. And it was a very safe place because it was a private group. And so I was able to start sharing um, some of what I wanted to share in a safe location. And that gave me the courage to then move out a little bit and start including it in my social media. And then, literally, like overnight, I just woke up and I said, enough, stop hiding. It's time. The time is now. And the world needs so many voices right now. And so it's just, I felt it was really, really important. And I always have felt that if you're going to share information with somebody, the best way to do it is to lead that way, by example. And so, how can I ask other people to share their voices if I was still afraid to share mine? So I had to step out and into it.
well, and thank you. We very deeply. We thank you for sharing, for finding the courage to share this journey of yours, because I'm sure a lot of people would really able to relate to it. But was there any specific chapter in Voices in this particular book that was particularly vulnerable or difficult for you to write?
None of them were difficult to write per se because I said I
Mhm.
really felt like I channeled most of the book because the ideas would just come and then
Yeah.
it would just evolve. But as far as sharing something that I was a little nervous about people that I'm close to
Mm,
knowing about was when I started with my light language.
mm,
Because, a lot of I perceived a lot of the people in my family and those that I were close to would think that that was really odd and that they would think I was crazy and,
mm,
wouldn't be accepting of it. And that really stemmed from a little bit of baggage I was still carrying from the past with the speech disorder and everything when I cared what people think of me. And so that made me a little nervous, but I
Mhm.
was still willing to do it because I felt it was so important. Because when I first activated, when my light language was activated, I didn't even know what light language was. And
Yeah.
so I truly thought I was going a little bit out of my mind. And especially because it came with a lot of hand, light
Yes.
language too. And and when I receive codes, my whole body shakes. And so I thought I was going through spasms, that these sounds are coming out of me, my hands are going crazy. And I didn't know what was going on. And so writing about that, I felt was so important to share for those going through it too. But that's the part that probably made me the most nervous. And I didn't have to be. I mean, because everybody in my family that has read the book has totally accepted it. So I'm
Well,
grateful for that.
that's wonderful news. I'm happy for you. Well, you mentioned in this book that this book will make will make your readers, people, laugh, cry, and most importantly, remember. What's one thing you remembered about yourself all throughout this writing journey?
The thing that really came back into a forefront for me was my inner child. And
Mm,
because I buried her sweetness, and she was and is very sweet, but I buried that so deeply and didn't acknowledge her for years because of the pain of the speech. The I don't mean to keep on bringing up the speech disorder, but it really affected me for most of my life
mhm.
because of what I embodied out of the experience.
Yes.
And because it was embodied, I internalized so much of it that I really believed it to be true. And so for years, constantly in my mind were always running the words, you're stupid, you're dumb, you're lazy, you're stupid, you're dumb, you're lazy, on and on and on. It went on. And so I just kept on burying that little girl deeper and deeper, wanting nothing to do with
Mhm.
her. And I didn't fully acknowledge her pain and accept her back into my life until last summer when I wrote that, letter to my inner child, which I do mention in the book.
Yes.
And it makes me wonder how many people do have issues with their inner child and try to bury it deep and don't acknowledge, and
Yeah.
how much joy they can bring back in their life, because that is the child, is the joy. And, bring it back and be accepting and, just fully acknowledge that it's okay, and you need to be acknowledged, you need to be loved, you need to be accepted.
Wonderful. Is this the same? Would this be the same message that you would maybe give to someone who's currently in the dark, unsure, or even maybe broken?
First of all, I don't believe anybody truly is broken. All right.
Hmm.
Again, to go back to what I said earlier, I think it's just a matter of looking at it as not what needs to be fixed, but what am I burying? What am I not looking at?
Hmm.
And so a lot of people are afraid to look at their shadow, the shadow side, the darkness. And that is part of who we are too. And so it's just acknowledging it. So anybody that's going through it, I would just say, first of all, love yourself.
Hmm.
Second, I would say you're exactly where you need to be. All right. Because everything is in divine timing. And acknowledge that that part of you is just trying to encourage you to grow and to learn. And so like I mentioned, a lot of people are afraid of shadow work. You don't need to be. It's an invitation to grow, is what it is. And so everything is the way you frame it in your mind. So instead of going, oh, what happens if I delve deeper into, this on why I'm acting this way or I'm depressed or this or that, instead of doing it, just what's the opportunity to grow here? What is source trying to make me accept and understand about myself? And when you approach it that way, it just lightens everything.
Hmm.
It just
Yes,
lightens everything.
that's wonderful. Well, if your younger self were to read this book right now, Voices, what do you think she'd say?
She probably wouldn't say anything, but she would do a major happy dance all over the place. Just like, finally, way to go, mom, even though she's me, because the older, way to go, mom, and just this little happy dance and everything, because that little inner child used to love to dance, and that got stifled too. It got stifled big time. And so, yeah, a couple of inner children, they're at different ages, would just be all doing this little crazy happy
That's wonderful. I'm sure she will. Well, how do you envision your book being used in circles, book clubs, or spiritual communities?
I would hope that what it would do is start conversations in
Mhm.
general. And actually, part of that has already happened. I have one of
Yes.
my neighbors that I shared the book with, and she's heavily involved with her church, which is right up the street. It's North Madison Congregational Church. And they asked me to speak, to share and do a book reading and everything. And so I was really excited about
Oh,
that. Yeah. But so if it's shared, I would love to see it as a conversation starter. And also on the personal level, because of the tools that I put in there that are really actionable steps that you can
mhm.
do to help you through whatever that chapter happens to be about.
Yes.
I would love to see people starting to use those tools to, make their journey a little easier. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Well, if these people would like to connect with you after reading your book, or maybe half after listening to us here, how can they reach out?
They can reach out through my website, CherylTCampbell.com, or any of my social channels. Instagram is probably the only one that's not under Cheryl T. Campbell. It's under Unlocking Cheryl.
Mm.
And, but, my email and everything, phone number is all out there. And I welcome people to contact me because I love meeting new people.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for that. What's next for you? Are we planning on another book, maybe a workshop, a retreat?
I'm not quite sure yet because things are still unfolding, and I am in the process of putting together a membership site, for lack of a better word, that is going to be filled with, guidance on
Mhm.
how to navigate some of this different stuff. And I love creating meditations, and so it'll be filled with meditations. And I also love creating what I refer to as invocations
Yes.
that can help in all different aspects of your life. So the membership will have that kind of thing, articles on how you can work through it, little mini courses,
Mhm.
and a list of invocations and meditations, all available through this monthly membership. So I am actively working on that. Although, because we do take quite a bit of time off in the summer, my husband and I,
Mhm.
and we go north every other weekend. I don't see that launching until at least the end of July. But all of that will be on my website as well. But I'm excited for that. I think that's going to
Well,
be a lot of fun to work on.
that's wonderful. It's something nice to look forward to. So
Yes.
that's
Yes.
great to hear. Well, thank you so much, Cheryl, for sharing your heart, your healing, and your powerful journey with us today. So, Four Voices, Stepping Out of the Darkness and Into the Light is a guiding light for anyone ready to embrace their truth and step fully into who they were created to be. The ebook is now available on Amazon. So if you're ready to reconnect with your soul, reclaim your voice, and rise into the light, grab your copy today.
Yes.
Thanks
And,
again, everyone. Yes,
just a little quick comment. Also, the soft cover is being introduced today.
yes.
Yes, I'm super excited about that.
It will be, yes, it will be available soon.
Yeah.
The softcover paperback will be
Yeah.
available soon as
Yeah.
well.
Thank you so
Wonderful.
much for having me, Jocelyn. It was good to see you again.
Well, you're very much welcome and congratulations.
Thank you.
And we look forward for more sessions with you in the future.
Thank
All
you
right.
so much. You
Until
have a
next
great day.
time.
Bye bye for now.
Bye bye.